Hey guys, Mrs. Sands here. So I just wanted to do lesson 10 on video for you. This way, if you had questions on how to do one of the problems, maybe the video would be helpful. You didn't have to do the do now, but since it's here, I figure I might as well do it. So when it asks if negative 5, 3 is a solution to the system, I wrote down that I'm going to do 2 checks to see if negative 5, 3 is a solution. If it works in both equations, then it is a solution. If it doesn't work, then it's not a solution. So when I plug in a negative 5 for x and a 3 for y, I get negative 2 equals negative 2. So it checks in the first equation, but remember, in order to be a solution, it has to check in both of them. So I will check it in the second one. And again, make sure you plug the x and the y in the correct spots. And negative 2 times negative 5 is 10, and 10 plus 3 is 13. And yeah, it is a solution. And I know it's a solution because it checked out in both equations. Or it made both equations true when I substituted in the negative 5 and 3. Number 2, it asks us to look at the system, okay, and then it asks us a question. Using the 4 choices below, which choice could you immediately eliminate? Look at this. It says y is negative 1. So it can't be choice 3. That doesn't have a negative 1 in the y spot. And then it asks which choice is the correct answer. So I'm going to use this as my substitute and plug it in place of y so that I can find out what the x is. I get that x is 1. So the answer is 1 comma negative 1. So it's choice 2. And I'm going to do all of these. If you can do this review, and if you have good notes written down for yourself, remember it will be helpful to you for your quiz. So when we do things graphically, remember you have to separate the 2 equations and get it into y equals mx plus b form. So I'll do one equation at a time. And I'm trying to get y by itself. So remember, you always undo your adding or subtracting first, and then the division last. Now, right here, people make a mistake, so please be very careful. This negative 5 in the denominator divides into both pieces of the numerator. And remember, this is like a negative 1. So negative 1 over negative 5 is really positive 1 over 5x. And negative 15 over negative 5 is really positive 3. So for this first equation, the slope is 1/5, and the y-intercept is 3. Y-intercept we usually call b. We don't like calling it y. So I'll start at the y-intercept, and I'll go up 1, right 5. And don't forget to label it. And now we'll do the second equation. This one just has some division involved. Remember, there's a 1 in front of the x, so this is also 1/5 x, but the y-intercept's negative 1. It has the same slope and a different y-intercept, which means these lines are going to be parallel. Remember, parallel lines have no solution. Remember that the solution to a system is the point of intersection. So if they never intersect, I guess they never have a solution. So when it asks you what's the solution, you say no solution. Therefore, there's no checks to do. On number 2, there is a solution. So remember, I'm trying to get y by itself, so I'll first add x to both sides. And now it's in y equals mx plus b form, so I know the m is 1, and the y-intercept is -3. So I'll graph that first. I'll start at -3. And the slope is 1 over 1, so I'll go up 1, right 1. And we have to label this. And the second equation, we have to get y by itself, so we'll first subtract x. Then we'll divide by -2. And remember, negative divided by negative is positive, so this is a positive 1/2 x. And 4 divided by -2 is -2. So the slope is 1/2, and the y-intercept is -2. Remember, you start at the y-intercept, and now we do our slope, which is up 1, right 2, and right there I found my intersection. Soon as you put a point on top of a point that was already there, you know you found your solution. You should continue to graph, of course, but at least you know what your solution is. Make sure you put arrows, and make sure you always label the line. I label it with the original equation. And I point to where the solution is, and I write solution. I also write the coordinates. This is 2, -1. So there's more work to do now. If the solution is 2, -1, it means I have 2 checks to do. I'm checking the point 2, -1 in the original equations. Has to be the original. So y minus x equals -3. And the other one is x minus 2y equals 4. Plug the x and the y in the right spots. And -1 minus 2 is -3. And let's plug in again. -2 times a -1 is a +2, and 2 plus 2 is 4. So that one checked as well. So that's how you do the graphic method. There is one question on your quiz tomorrow where you have to graph. And if there's a solution, you have to do 2 checks. Now we have to solve these by either substitution or elimination. On your quiz, there are 4 questions that are algebraic. So number 3, I would do by elimination because everything's lined up. I don't have opposites. I have a 4x and a 4x. I wish one of them was a -4x. I'm going to multiply one of them by a -1. So I'm going to keep my top equation what it was. And the bottom equation, everything gets multiplied by a -1, therefore everything changes signs. Once I have opposites, that's when I'm allowed to put my plus sign on my line. Never add it together until you have opposites, because you want to be able to add but really cross something out. So 5y plus 1y is 6y, and 23 plus a -5 is 18. Divide both sides by 6, y equals 3. Remember, the solution is a point, so I only found part of it. Take one of your equations and plug a 3 in for y. I guess I'll use the second equation. And in place of the y, I'll put the 3. I have to solve this for x. So I get x is 2. Remember, after you solve, you have to do 2 checks. So in place of x, I'll put a 2, and in place of y, I'll put a 3. So the first one worked. And again, in place of x, I put a 2, and in place of y, I put a 3. And that one worked as well. Number 2, it's definitely substitution. Wherever I see a y, I put a 2x. So I'll rewrite the bottom equation with the substitute plugged in. And now I'm just solving this. First I multiplied. Now I'm going to combine like terms and divide. So I have that my x-coordinate is -6. Take this number and plug it back into the top equation because it says y equals 2x. So y equals 2 times -6, which means y is -12. And then you have to do 2 checks. In place of x, I'll put the -6, and in place of y, I'll put the -12. And check number 2. In place of x, put a -6. In place of y, put a -12. 4 times -6 is -24. -3 times -12 is +36. And a -24 and a +36 is 12. And over here it said 12. So both checks worked. Number 5, I'm going to do by elimination. Now, there's not just one right way to do this. I could multiply the bottom equation by a -2, and then it would eliminate my x's, because that would mean I would have a -4 in the bottom. Or I could multiply my top equation by 3, because then my y's would be eliminated. So that's what I'm going to do. So this 3 gets multiplied by everything. I have 12x minus 3y equals 30. And the bottom equation I'm going to leave as is, because see how it says a plus 3y? So that's where my opposites are. There's not just one right opposite to get. I could have made my x's opposite. There wouldn't have been anything wrong with that. This is just what I chose to do. So 42 divided by 14 is 3. Now I substitute this in. Doesn't matter if you use the top or the bottom, so I'm just going to use the top one. This is a negative y, so be careful. If negative y equals -2, then that means positive y equals +2. So my answer is 3, 2. Of course, I have to do 2 checks. In place of x, I'll put a 3. In place of y, I'll put a 2. And check number 2. In place of x, I'll put a 3. And in place of y, I'll put a 2. So they both worked. Number 6, we'll do elimination. I'll multiply the top by a -3. So I get -3x minus 3y equals -24. And the bottom, I have 3x plus 3y equals 24. How odd does that look? Do you notice? Everything is opposites. If everything is opposites, it means the x's cross out, the y's cross out, And even these constants cross out, which means I have a 0 on the left side and a 0 on the right side. The only thing I know is that this is true, which means it's always true, which means every answer works. There's an infinite number of solutions. Therefore, I don't have to do a check. Whenever there's an infinite number of solutions, you find out very quickly. It's usually a short problem to do. Number 7, this is also set up for elimination because everything's lined up. A trick that always works is if you don't know what numbers to multiply by, you could always multiply the top equation by the first number you see in the bottom equation. And you could always multiply the bottom equation by the number you see in the top equation. That should eliminate things. That's kind of just like a trick, though. It's not always the best thing to do. Like I would actually rather keep my numbers a little smaller. I know that a -4 and a 10, I can make them 20. If I multiply the top by 5, I get a -20. If I multiply them by 2, I get a +20. So I do try and keep my numbers smaller. That was just a tip I was giving you in case you ever get stuck. If you multiply the top equation by the bottom number you see, if you multiply the bottom equation by the top number you see, you should be able to eliminate things. But if you can find a smaller number, that does make your calculations a little easier. But remember, you're allowed to use a calculator. So, oh, I forgot my x. So I get -20x plus 10y equals 0. And then 20x plus 6y equals 16. Since I have opposites by the x's, I can add these together. The x's cross out. I get 16y equals 16. So y equals 1. And then pick either equation and plug in 1 for y. I'll pick the bottom one, just for the heck of it. People make a mistake here all the time. X does not equal 2. 5 over 10 is a half, right? 5 is smaller than 10. When the top number is smaller, your answer will be a fraction. So now we have 2 checks to do. In place of x, I'll put a half. -4 times a half is -2. 2 times 1 is 2. And -2 plus 2 is 0. So checks in the first one. Ten times a half is 5. 3 times 1 is 3. And 5 times 3 is 8. So checks in the second one. Number 8 is set up for substitution. Right here is my substitute. I plug it in for y. So I rewrite the equation with the substitute plugged in parentheses. And now you distribute. And now you combine like terms. But when I combine like terms, they like get rid of each other. And I'm left with 12 equals 6, which is not true. So when your variables go away and you're left with a false statement, this means it has no solution. If there's no solution, there's no checks to do. And when there's a no solution, you find out very quickly. So you can see in all of these problems that graphing is a lengthy process. But the algebraic, when you have one solution, there's way more work than if you have an infinite number of solutions like number 6. If there's an infinite number of solutions, you find out right at the very beginning. And if there's a no solution, you find out pretty much right at the very beginning. And I hope this was helpful, and good luck on your quiz. See ya. Bye.